Major Farrington. Major Farrington met with an accident in World War II when his jeep collided with a train. He had to be hospitalized with serious injuries all over his body. Most of the time in the hospital he was under the influence of drugs to keep down the pain. During one period of wakefulness he felt that he was looking at his own body from above his bed and Jesus Christ was standing near his body, telling him that he would recover. Major General Bhatia, the doctor in charge, felt that his was too serious a case to be treated in India and sent him to England, where several parts of his body were put in plaster for nearly 3 years. Even in England he had visions of Jesus Christ while in hospital. He came to India on the passing of Mrs. Bhatia to condole with Major General Bhatia and accompanied him to the ashram when the latter came at my request to examine Bhagwan, then seriously ill with sarcoma. Bhagwan was in the Nirvana room and asked Major Farrington to be seated, and he took a seat near Bhagwan. He was looking at Bhagwan and thinking why people call him Bhagwan, which means God, and what was the difference between Bhagwan and Jesus. Then he saw Bhagwan as Jesus and was at first incredulous. He rubbed his eyes to look again to assure himself that he was not dreaming. The vision persisted until he was quite convinced of what he saw. That night, before retiring to bed, he and Major General Bhatia were my guests. He told me of this vision of his and asked me to believe that he was not in the least hysterical or given to spinning stories. He left India by boat and on the high seas while sitting on the deck. He had again a vision of Bhagwan walking on the waters even as Jesus had done. He immediately made a note of the date and time of this vision in his diary. His girlfriend met him at Southampton and had with her a copy of the London Times which he looked into to find a report of the Mahasamadhi of Bhagwan. He found that the time he had the vision of Bhagwan walking on the high seas while he was on board the ship was the time when Bhagwan attained Mahasamadhi. That was indeed a wonderful coincidence. Miss E.G. Marston. Miss Elizabeth Marston's life would fill a volume which, much as I urged her to, she would never write. The child of affluent parents, she lacked the love of the mother in childhood. A society lady had left the care of the infant to a governess. This lack affected her entire life. On the death of her mother, she accepted the post of a companion to a crippled lady without her father's knowledge and successively became a guide at art exhibitions, a tourist guide in England, and later on the continent. In the course of her tours, she picked a considerable knowledge of the different countries and could speak some of the European languages. Being spiritually minded, she fell in with Gurdjieff Rodolph Senior and also J. Krishnamurti. She had gone round the world several times and had friends amongst all kinds of people all over the world. She heard of India and came to Benares, where she took up residence in some village nearby to become a self-appointed friend, philosopher, medical woman, and arbitrator to the village folk there, helping to settle their quarrels and avoid bad blood and waste of money in fruitless litigation. Hearing of Bhagwan, she came to Tiruvannamalai and became an ardent devotee of Bhagwan and my good friend. This friendship lasted for life. She would at first spend only the winter months here, but later settled down here in a cottage built for herself. Before coming to India, after the death of her father, she had packed her all, not inconsiderable, worldly goods and left them in the care of Mrs. Thomas Cook. In 1939, she heard that the warehouse in which her goods had been stored had been completely bombed out, and this information she carried to Bhagwan, who heard it with his usual Sometime later, to her pleasurable surprise, she heard that the portion of That warehouse where her goods had been stored was alone saved, while the rest of it had been destroyed. She was much concerned with the slow progress of the Samadhi work, and when the ashram trustees asked her, she said she would have done the work quite efficiently and wonderfully too, with all her experience and knowledge. But she made it a condition that she should be given the sole charge of the work without let or interference from anyone. This was not possible. The last few years saw her fall ill of cancer. A specialist advised that it be removed by an operation, giving her 6 months if it was not. She declined to be operated on, patiently bore her illness for nearly 3 years, during which period Miss Nartaki, her neighbor, nursed her with loving care. Sri Naina. Professor Munagala Venkatramaya is the well-known editor of the popular book Talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi and was affectionately called Naina. I had the good fortune to meet him even on the first occasion I came to Bhagwan to take his blessings for my scheme of the Home of Devotion, when I stayed for only a few days. Later, when I came to give fight to Bhagwan for having misled me, as I thought, over that scheme, I came into closer contact with Naina. This developed into friendship in the course of time. I used to refer my friends to him for enlightenment on Bhagwan's philosophy. He was a constant visitor to my residence, whether in Bose compound or in the house I later built, and did much to smoothen my relationship with the ashram management. He somehow persuaded me to continue to reside here whenever I felt like living in disgust. After Bhagwan's Mahasamadhi, Naina took to sannyas and was known as Sri Ramanananda Saraswati, more familiarly as Munagala Swami. He took up permanent abode in the ashram in 1960. All his children are ardent devotees of Bhagwan. When Naina, who now was nearly 80, fell seriously ill and had to be rushed to the CMC hospital Vellore, it was I who took him there. Then his children also came there. He passed away there. He was brought to Tiruvannamalai and buried in the compound of the house of his daughter Kamakshi had built. His children were profuse in the expression of their indebtedness to me for the way I had attended on their father in his last days. Sri Narayana Iyer, a recipient in a particularly large measure of the grace of Bhagwan among his numerous devotees, is Sri Narayana Iyer, a retired sub-registrar now living in the vicinity of the ashram. Perhaps because of Narayana Iyer, from his first meeting with him, stubbornly refused to consider Bhagwan as a mere man. He fell a victim to Bhagwan's charm and remained an ardent devotee. I am not competent to speak of his numerous experiences with Bhagwan. I hope Sri Narayana Iyer himself will set them down for the delectation of posterity. Two incidents stand out particularly in my memory. I had arranged for the exhibition of a film made up of a few shots of the life of Bhagwan to be shown in the old hall. The projection apparatus and the film were the gift of Mr. Raja Reddy. The time for the show was settled at 7 p.m. by the Sarvadhikari. When he told Bhagwan, Bhagwan remarked that Sri Narayana Iyer, when on duty at Polur, would not be in a position to reach the ashram in time. He used to visit the ashram every day in the evening and return to Polur, about 20 miles from the ashram. The Sarvadhikari would not change the timing. I was in a dilemma, as Bhagwan had said that the show could go on, but he would not be there. However, the situation resolved itself, since Sri Narayana Iyer came to the ashram rather early that day, and the show went on as scheduled. When Sri Narayana Iyer dug a well in the compound of his house, Bhagwan evinced keen interest in its day-to-day progress. When water was first struck in the well, Narayana Iyer got some of it to Bhagwan, who tasted it and declared that the water was good and sweet. I can vouch for it as a matter of my personal experience that while the wells in the vicinity would dry up in the hot season, this particular one always had plenty of water. I believe it is so because of Bhagwan's grace. Peter X., Owner of a prosperous curio shop in England, some troubles caused Peter such severe mental strain that he was advised a sea voyage. He came from Colombo for a short stay here, having been recommended to call at the Ramanashram. He could not sleep without drugs, and they too acted tardily as he had become immune to them. Sympathizing with his lot, I just told him that he would sleep that night without drugs. So he did, the drugs having been removed to a safe place by a sympathetic neighbor. So sound was his sleep that night that he had to be awakened from bed the next morning. He felt that it was the grace of Bhagwan, of whom he knew next to nothing then, that was responsible for the change in him, and decided to prolong his stay until he was obliged to return to England on urgent private affairs. Settling up these affairs that took him to England, he came back and was my neighbor, regular in his visits to the old hall for meditation. He told me that he derived immense benefit not only from the time he spent in the old hall, but also from a perusal of the literature concerning Bhagwan. After nearly a year here, he fell ill rather seriously and had to go back to England. I learned he is now quite well and that he plans to go over and settle down here after setting up his only son in life. May Bhagwan grant his wish. Rangaswamy. Several persons have served Bhagwan as his attendants some time or other. Among them all, as far as I know, Rangaswamy was most careful and discerning. He served Bhagwan for a number of years. I called him Nandi, having regard to his dark skin, his short stature, and the fact that almost always he could be seen standing behind Bhagwan. I was at dinner one evening at my residence when he came running from the ashram to tell me that Bhagwan was likely to leave us soon. I asked him why. He told me that it was his turn that day to attend on Bhagwan, and as he was massaging the arm that had been operated upon for cancer, Bhagwan had very graciously smiled upon him and told him that he had given them all a lot of trouble, but that the trouble would end in 2 or 3 days. Bhagwan had also said that there was no equivalent in Tamil for the English words thank you very much, except Romba Santosham, and that Bhagwan felt much obliged for the loving and kind attention they had all paid him. Bhagwan said further that his attendants might be at peace afterwards. Dr. and Mrs. K. Syed. Dr. Syed, who for some time had been a professor in the University of Allahabad, was a staunch devotee of Bhagwan, despite the vehement protests of Mrs. Syed, a staunch Muslim. She even threatened to divorce her husband should he persist in his visits to Bhagwan. They had only one daughter who had appeared for the matriculation examination and afterwards contracted enteric fever and passed away, leaving her parents disconsolate. As is not unusual with people in such a state, Dr. Syed came to Bhagwan and took up residence in Palakottu adjoining the ashram. He too fell ill seriously and Mrs. Syed was sent for despite his protests. He recovered gradually and when he was able to walk about, told Mrs. Syed that he was going to the old hall when Mrs. Syed warned him to be careful of what happened to him there. All the time she was there with her husband, she had not entered the ashram at all and was only in Palakottu. 2 or 3 days later, she of her own accord accompanied her husband to the old hall with the Quran bound in red cloth tucked under the armpit, made a short bow to Bhagwan and proceeded immediately to sit near a distant window to read the Quran as if to ward off pollution. So orthodox was she. The mellifluous voice of Bhagwan would often distract her attention from the Quran and cause her to look up. The subsequent 2 or 3 days she came to the old hall and then one morning telling her husband that she was going to the bazaar, she got there from some fine piece of khadar, out of which she made an upper cloth, towel and pillow covers, embroidered them and offered them to Bhagwan in the old hall. Bhagwan expressed his appreciation of the excellent needlework. Mrs. Syed was a capable needlewoman, and these articles were brought into use. The deep grief of the woe-begone mother had felt at the death of her only daughter gave place to relief. Indeed, a feeling that she departed daughter had not left her at all but was with her in her heart came over Mrs. Syed in the presence of Bhagwan. At the time of their departure, she made a deep, low bow to Bhagwan and left for their home in Allahabad. Bhagwan appeared to her thrice in dream there, but she saw only the bust of Bhagwan and not Bhagwan in full height. Thereafter the couple came to Bhagwan on 2 or 3 occasions. Mrs. Syed had been accustomed to visit a learned Maulvi in Lucknow. Coming to know of her visits to Bhagwan, he reprimanded her for being a renegade. But even after this the couple came to Bhagwan once. Mrs. Syed, however, was troubled in mind because of her experience in the presence of Bhagwan and because of the Maulvi had reprimanded her notwithstanding the beneficent effect Bhagwan's mere darshan had brought on her. On their return, the Maulvi informed Mrs. Syed that they were planning a trip to Mecca. Would she care to join? The journey would cost about rupees 2,000, she was told. While at dinner, she told her husband of this. Surprisingly enough, he provided the funds for her journey. Reaching Mecca, she sat for 3 nights consecutively at the Karbala with this one prayer to find an answer for the question that was disturbing her, whether she had been right in visiting Bhagwan. The first 2 nights gave her no reply, and the third day she began her prayers in a somewhat dejected mood. In the small hours of the morning, to her intense delight, a musical voice said thrice in rising crescendo, "What is here is there. What is here is there." That settled her doubts once and for all, and she returned to India very happy. Mrs. Syed told me about this incident in her chaste Urdu and sweet voice that night when a cobra appeared behind my back, to the astonishment of both Mrs. Syed and Suna, as has been related elsewhere. The Syeds had then built a cottage for themselves in the ground where we now have the Satanur guest house. She told me that Bhagwan had appeared to her thrice when they were in that cottage while she was at namaz early in the morning. At my request, this cottage is still preserved in the grounds of that guest house. Mr. K.R. Venkatasubramanya Iyer was a great devotee of Bhagwan. He first heard of Bhagwan in Calcutta in 1915 from Brahmana Swami. When his wife passed away in 1918, he became a Vairagi and came to Bhagwan. In those days, Bhagwan was having bhiksha brought to him by devotees. Seeing this, Venkata Iyer decided that they should have their own kitchen and cooking. So, one fine morning he brought rice, dal and all necessary things and told Bhagwan that no more food will come from outside. It will be cooked here, and requested Bhagwan's mother that thereafter food will have to be prepared. This is how the first time cooking started at Skandashram, and Bhagwan and all devotees ate together. He was also the first one who started contributing rupees 25 per month regularly till he died, and this practice was followed by other devotees also. It was only Mr. Venkata Iyer who in 1931-32 started Vedaparayana, chanting Vedas morning and evenings, the Upanishads in the morning and Rudra Japam in the evening. A court musician. The prince of a certain native state in India once sent me a person with a letter asking me to place his case before Bhagwan. This person, who knew only Hindi, asked me to seek Bhagwan's grace for him. I shall set out the background of this. The person was a musician at the court of the prince and was also tutor to the children of the prince. He was a devotee of goddess Durga, and during the Durga Puja he would avail himself of the holidays to celebrate the festival on a grand scale with all the resources placed at his disposal by the prince. One night he had a dream. A grave sage-like person dressed all in white and with a white beard appeared to him in the dream, and even while he was aware that this body was lying in the bed, took him by hand and led him that night to the moon, and on the succeeding nights from one planet to another and then to another, until in company with the sage he had visited all the planets. The night after all these visits were completed, he was again led by the hand by the sage through regions which alternatively were pitch dark and full of light over a vast distance, and at last they arrived at the gates of a palace of gold where the gatekeepers recognized the sage and permitted them to enter. Mother Parvati and Lord Shiva were seated on the throne in a vast hall, on entry into which Mother Parvati told the Lord Shiva that the musician was her devotee and told the musician that she was always with him and would protect him, but that he must keep it a close secret. Should he reveal it, she would give him up and thereafter forever. To cut the long story short, his performance acquired a divine character and his pujas attracted large crowds and he commanded great respect. His neighbor, a musician himself, became jealous and set afloat several rumors regarding this musician, which in course of time so much upset him as to let him blurt out the fact that Mother Parvati was always with him. Consequently, Mother deserted him as she had told him she would in the dream. The result was that his concert lost their fervor and he lost interest in life. The prince, who was deeply interested in the musician, therefore had sent him to me with a request that I should take him to Bhagwan and set if he could at all be helped. Hearing the story, Bhagwan told the musician to go beyond even the concept of darshan of Sri Parvati, although the musician could not at first follow what Bhagwan said. He remained with me for quite some time thereafter and would come to the old hall, sit in the presence of Bhagwan and sing to Bhagwan with fervor in the afternoon, even as he had done before. I told Bhagwan again of his plight. He left after some time and we felt that there was a distinct change in the musician's way of life and attitude for the better as he left. I have noticed the peculiar look Bhagwan would bestow on him after he heard his story, and that look was on him all the time he sang in Bhagwan's presence. I believe that Bhagwan's grace had a lot to do with the change that was quite noticeable in him. Chapter 20. Here and There. Arunachala fulfills a wish. Mr. Mirza Raza, a cousin of Sir Mirza Ismail, was my landlord in Bangalore and had been of great help in the presentation of the Oriental pageant described elsewhere. When I was in Bangalore, he was of great help to me. After I had settled down in Tiruvannamalai, I asked him to visit me there, but he refused, having heard of my renegation at Bombay. A year or two later, I requested him to help me purchase a car for my use in Tiruvannamalai, as I had constantly to run about to Madras and other places in connection with ashram work, and invited him again to my place to talk over my need. He came one morning and said he had come just for a few hours and took me to task for giving up my life in Bombay and taking to this purposeless life, as he called it. That evening, as I was going to the old hall, he accompanied me and was introduced to Bhagwan. He sat in front of Bhagwan and his eyes were constantly winking in Bhagwan's presence. A little later, I took him up the hill which I told him was a sacred one and a wish fulfiller. He referred to the saying in Persian that one's wish would be granted even if it rained when the wish was expressed, and asked if it would grant my boon that may be asked. On my replying in the affirmative, he wished to know if the hill was such as I had described it to be. It was not the rainy season and there was brilliant sunshine, but almost immediately there were a few drops of rain followed by such a heavy downpour as to soak us both thoroughly to our skin. We ran helter-skelter to take shelter with Nayana and then residing in a hut in Palakottu. Rain ceased as we reached the hut. I told Nayana what had happened. Nayana said it was a truly remarkable and astounding miracle. Had I told Bhagwan? It was then late and we were drenched, so I said we would do so the morning after. But even before I did, Nayana had told Bhagwan as early as 5 a.m., long before we went to the ashram. Mr. Raza gave his personal experience of the miracle of Arunachala wide publicity. Subsequently, he came on 2 or 3 occasions to pay his respects to Bhagwan. Ascent up the hill. The story of Bhagwan when up the hill being bitten by bees as he neared the spot where Sri Arunagiri Yogi is believed to be well known to repeat here. That was long before I came to Bhagwan. The story was recounted to me by Nayana one evening. I wished I went up the hill too. The next day I went into the old hall. Bhagwan inquired of me what the matter was, and Nayana recounted the story he had told me and of my wish to go up the hill. Bhagwan gave the necessary permission, but Mr. Cohen, who was there, protested that I suffered from weak heart and it was not right for me to attempt the difficult ascent. Since Bhagwan's blessing was there, I said I would go, come what might. A rather large party of us decided to climb the hill, and preparations for our food and rest on the hill were accordingly made. In our party was an old lady, the mother of Mr. Bose, about 75 years of age, as also Nayana and Sri Devaraj Mudaliar. All of us went up to the top of the hill. After some time at the top, the party came down to a flat rock below the peak, and we had our lunch and rest and returned to the ashram at about 6:30 p.m. But before us all, the old lady, Mr. Bose's mother, had left the party and come down alone to the ashram and told Bhagwan of our doings on the hill. As we entered the hall, Bhagwan asked about our experiences and said that all the day he was watching the clock on the wall, timing us at the several spots on the hill, but that he did not expect us to rest on the hill. I did not feel the strain of the climb, not only because I had Bhagwan's blessings, but also because both Nayana and Devaraj Mudaliar were always at my side to help me. This incident recalls to me the experience that befell Nayana, who, on hearing from Bhagwan his experience with the bees, decided to explore the hill for the particular spot and went up the hill with a party equipped with food and other necessaries. But a little way up the hill the party dispersed for some reason or other, and they wandered about the hill and came back to the ashram quite tired and starving about 9:30 p.m. I record this incident to show that where we obtained Bhagwan's blessings, our endeavors succeeded in spite of seemingly insurmountable obstacles, and disaster overtakes us if we thought we could do better without Bhagwan's permission.